Hello and welcome to the Everyday Adventure podcast. My name is Nicki and I will be bringing you thoughts and ideas and hopefully some inspiration on how to build more adventure into your everyday life. So today I'm absolutely thrilled to be joined by Clare Dyson, also known as the Horseback Adventurer. And in May 2018, Clare rode around the Lake District on a pony called Pansy, accompanied by her dog Finn, covering over 250 miles of bridleway. I first came across Clare when I was attending the virtual night of adventure a few months ago, and I was immediately struck by the simplicity of the idea. I think that something that probably would have been really commonplace, not even 150 years ago, actually nowadays is really quite out of the ordinary, quite extraordinary. And I was really interested to find out how she came up with the idea, what sowed the seed in the first place, and how the adventure came to take place. I think there is something incredibly powerful about our connection with animals and how we relate to them and how they serve to ground us in the present. So that's also something that I'm going to be exploring with Clare in our conversation. So Clare, it's absolutely fantastic to speak to you. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. Nice to be chatting with you finally.
Absolutely. It's taken a few goes, but we've got here. And I'm hoping the internet holds up for this one as well. Like I said, it is a really interesting concept and idea that you came up with. And I just wondered what inspired you to get started on this journey. Where did the idea come from?
That's interesting. I think looking back, there's a lot of things that triggered me doing this trip, but I think it goes way back into childhood. I think often the books that we read as children and the things that we're inspired by as we're growing up and in our very early years are often the things that really, later in life you find yourself going like, oh yeah, that thing, yeah, that was really significant to this actually, and links really clearly. So I spent a lot of childhood just outside, and we had a bit of a big garden and like wild places for a child. I think that quite an early point actually was I always talk about is when I was sat on the loo actually in the upstairs bathroom at home, and lots of posters on the walls that we put up, and they were sort of from like National Geographic and like wildlife magazines and things like that. And I remember looking at some of those National Geographic posters, and I don't know why it happened at that particular moment, but I just remember thinking, I just really want to have adventures in my life. And, looking at all these pictures of explorers and world maps and stuff, and just wanting adventure, I think. And that's quite an early memory. And it just happens to be in a toilet, which was, I don't know, a bit strange, quite significant for me for some reason. And then as I was growing up, I did a lot of horse riding from the age of about 8 to 18, really. So during that 10 years, I did a lot of mucking around with horses, and not in any particularly formal way, but just getting out into the local hills, which were the Chilterns. I grew up down in Buckinghamshire, and I never had my own horse or anything. It was always just kind of like horses on loan or at stables where I rode and stuff. And we'd get out into the woods a lot, and I'd go out a lot on my own, actually. I quite like spending time on my own outside, and even as a youngster, that was very true for me. And I can remember taking a particular horse that I had on loan, and I'd gone over to the valley over from where I normally rode, and sort of longer excursion, sort of a day ride out to a place called Dunsmore. And I just remember like riding along a bridleway and just and there was this lovely grassy glade next to where I was riding, and right in amongst the woods. And I just remember thinking like, God, I just imagine what it'd be like to camp there with your horse, and then the next day just get up and carry on the bridleway, just following your nose along, the trails and bridleways of that place. And I think that was really when the idea was really born. And that's kind of like some like early things that happened. But then I stopped horse riding at 18 really, and had a gap year, went to uni and did all those sorts of things. And then I moved to the Lake District when I was about 24, and you just stopped horse riding altogether really. It wasn't something that I was able to do particularly. I was never going to buy my own horse or anything like that. And I was really enjoying getting out in the mountains and doing other things. But then it was like I was doing some work with young people, working with young people in the outdoors and development training programs and engagement programs. And that was, you know, my line of work. And I was working with a young man called Adam, and I think he must have been about 18, 19 at the time. And I'd done a lot of work with him, I think, in terms of like his development and where he was going in his life. And he turned around to me one day and was like, so what do you really want to do? And I was like, this is a bit uncomfortable. I was sort of normally talking about what they want to do and, you know, how they're going to get there and take their steps. And having that turned on me by Adam, who was a really inspiring young man. And I don't use that term loosely, actually. He really was and still is. And he, you know, asking that question, I was like, do you know what? I'd absolutely love to do a long journey on horseback on my own. And he was like, well, you should do it. And I was like, yeah. And I think that was the moment that it really rekindled that sort of thought, really, that dream. So I was like, yeah, you're right, Adam, actually. You've got to walk the talk, haven't you? And yeah, so that was a very long-winded answer. So
no, amazing. But it's interesting, isn't it? How often, you know, sometimes like the ideas for adventures just come to people in the moment. But I think it's that thing of actually often the seeds are really deeply sown from a really young age. And it's how you, like you said, put things to one side and other things in life take over. But often we start coming back to those things that we really loved as children, even if it's not the actual thing. Sometimes it's the, you know, the feeling that inspired in us. And yeah, I can totally relate to that whole idea of wandering off on your pony and just on your own and the sort of I guess, the sense of peace and solitude it brings as well. So I think that's really interesting. What enabled you then to take it from that idea into a reality? There must have been quite a few steps to go from that, yeah, I'm going to do this, to, oh, wow, I am actually doing this.
Yeah, definitely. I think it was still, even after Adam said to me, you know, you should really do that, you know, and he kept on sort of nagging me about it. And then it was a couple of years later that I think, that was it. I went to the Eden Project, actually, and did a leadership program there, which I don't really see myself as a particular leader, but it was more about thinking about where your sense of purpose lies. So I had about 4 days there with some really, really inspiring people and really linking with where we want to go and connecting with our sort of that sense of purpose. Because if you connect with that, then you're going to be leading quite naturally anyway in that area. And I think it really stood out for me. It's like, right, I'm going to do this. And that was in October. And in the following May, we set off. So actually, once I'd committed, it was like, just started to really happen. And I think the biggest step for me was making that commitment and saying, I'm going to do this. And actually, I can be quite shy of commitment at times, I've got to admit. And that was quite a big step to really, you know, openly say, right, I'm doing this. I didn't have a horse at the time. And so that was quite a big barrier to get over. A horseback journey isn't a horseback journey without a horse. So
this is true, yeah.
So I chatted to a few people and things started just kind of rolling a bit. And I met this guy, Tom, who had a herd of fell ponies, which is the native breed up in the Lake District. And he lived about sort of half an hour down the road. And I think one November evening, I went and had a chat with him to pick his brains, actually, about traveling with horses, which he's done a lot of. And then a few weeks later, he rang me, actually, and said, if you look after my herd whilst I go away on holiday, I'll lend you a horse for your trip. And it was that moment where things just really started to get real. So he lent me a horse that I had to break in. So she'd been handled a lot, but she'd never been ridden. So I had a bit of work to do and to get her ready and to, you know, get all the saddlebags, work out how I was going to tether her. Like, I had a route in my head already, so that didn't feel like too much of a thing. I roughly knew what route I was going to take. Yeah, so then I had my work cut out, and I was working full time at the time. So it wasn't like, you know, I'm not like someone who has loads of spare time. So I was like bust a gut really to get everything ready in time. But I knew I wanted to set off on the 1st of May because May is like the best month in this country. Everything is springing to life. The weather's up here is often really settled, whereas it's like monsoon in August. So like May was the time really. So things just started to happen. Like, even it was funny actually, sometimes when you make that commitment, then things start, you have a radar out for anything towards that goal. And I think that was a big part of it. And, you know, I looked all over the internet for saddlebags from America, from France. And I was like, God, it's like a bit of a nightmare trying to work this out. And then I bumped into someone who said, oh, you know, there's a saddlebag maker in Windermere, don't you? And it's like he was 10 minutes down the road from my house.
No way.
Like, you know, like thinking, God, how am I going to work out what saddlebags to get? And then I met this brilliant woman called Lynn, and she made my saddlebags for Pansy, and it did fall into place quite nice. But it wasn't say it was a walk in the park. I had to put a lot of effort in as well. It all paid off really, and it was pretty nerve-wracking. You know, I got to know Tom obviously pretty well, and I was like, I just don't know if I'm ready. I don't know if it, and he was like, Claire, you could leave today and you'd probably be fine. So, and I think because he had such a laid back sort of positive attitude about it, it was like, you know, he's a bit of a maverick himself, and, you know, and it was just like, actually just get on with it, and just, yeah, it all sort of fell into place really.
Yeah, it's so interesting, isn't it, that sometimes it just takes having someone championing you, or just who can help you with those doubts, or that voice in your head going, what are you doing, or how's this going to happen? And you know, having someone actually there just going, that it'll be fine, can be so helpful. It's amazing. So what's the biggest challenge then that you faced as part of this? Because I can imagine there must have been, I mean, not like you've mentioned some of the challenges leading up to it, but I mean, what challenges did you face whilst you were actually on the trip?
Actually, on the trip, I was going to say the biggest challenge for me was definitely committing to it, and I think that is a huge barrier to get over. And even just because I've done this doesn't mean I don't still experience that. I definitely do, but I think that then you in yourself that it's actually, if I really push this, I'm going to be, you know, you're going to get that reward and stuff if you really go for something. That was a big pre-journey sort of barrier. But then once I was on it, I think things went well. We took our time, so we weren't pushing it or rushing or anything like that. I didn't want it to be that kind of trip, but we had a bit of a near miss on crossing a bridge over on the West Lakes, over near Ravenglass actually. Pansy, who was just, I mean, she was just brilliant and such a good horse for this thing that we were doing, but we crossed a bridge that hadn't had any sort of grip put on it, and it was a wooden bridge, and her front feet, it was only quite narrow, and her front feet slipped away as she stepped up onto this bridge. And I was next to her, I wasn't riding at the time, just because it seemed a bit like, well, I'll just go steady here. And her front feet slipped away. Her back hooves, because there was no kicker board, if you like, where she'd stepped up onto this bridge, there was no board to stop her feet, and her back feet just started to edge underneath the step, if you like. Ooh. And for the moment I was like, oh God, this is it. And it happens in such a split second, but she was so calm and so good, and she just at the last moment just got her feet up onto the bridge, and we got across and got to the other side, and was like, you know, I was almost
sick. Oh my goodness.
Like, you know, yes, gone wrong in that moment. And that was a bit of a moment, and we lost a shoe in that, but we got through it okay. And so that was part of the challenge. The other challenges on the route was, that was the main thing that was a near miss. And apart from that, we had good weather, so I think if we'd had really bad weather, that would have been quite a challenge. Losing a horseshoe obviously is quite significant, so then I had to stop off at a farm, which ended up being a really amazing experience. And this farmer, Alistair, tipped me in and let me have a place to stable Pansy until a farrier could come out the next morning. And but people are so kind, and they see you pushing the boundaries of something, and they people are incredibly helpful. And I always think it's funny that when you go abroad, actually, everyone always comes back saying, oh, the people were so friendly. And that's not just abroad, that's here too. And people were so kind to me, as on my journey as well, and let me graze Pansy in various places, and and that farmer, for example, and he even made me an egg butty and a cup of coffee in the morning, and we had a good old natter until I was ready to go on my way again. So challenges were, I don't know, I just felt like I don't know if I've got rose tinted glasses, but I just feel like I just enjoyed it so much that the challenges didn't seem to
It was part of it in a way that's,
yeah, definitely. It was quite daunting at times, not knowing if you were going to get over a pass. I tripped and fell a few times, and I had Pansy go right over my head at one point whilst I was down the hill. These things happen, and you stand up, brush yourself off, and you just get on with it. Yeah, I don't know, and I'm not like a particularly roughy tufty person. I don't see myself as anything particularly unusual, and in terms of some of the people I hang out with, I'm the softest of the lot. But yeah, I don't know, there was something in me that I was just in my element, and I think so was the dog, and so was Pansy, the pony and stuff. So yeah, we were all in our absolute element, sort of overcome it that way, really, by enjoying ourselves.
Well, I think this is it. It's interesting, isn't it, that actually sometimes what seems to be a challenge, or what's a challenge, it depends on our perception of it. Because for most people, probably having a pony tip over the top of your head would be pretty epic. But like you said, it was in a way that the challenge was actually getting started.
Yeah.
And once you were in that place, then this was all part of the adventure and the journey. So maybe that changes the perspective too. And I guess you touch on it a little bit, but I was just wondering what were some of the unexpected benefits? There's the obvious benefit of being out in this beautiful scenery, in this with lovely weather, with on a horse, and it's such a wonderful visual to picture as well. But I'm just wondering what happened that you didn't expect, and you're just like, wow, or has happened since, I guess.
During the trip, I think I didn't expect the three of us to bond as much as we did. And I did, I had to go through a couple of towns. I went through Keswick and Ambleside, and literally just passed through to get to the other side, to the bridleways on the other side of town, if you like. And I really didn't, I was winging it. I'd planned the first few nights of accommodation fields basically to stay in. And then beyond that, I was just see what happens. And I enjoy that kind of, I get quite a buzz out of just kind of seeing what happens. I'm not a big planner. I think I really deeply enjoyed the freedom of just kind of, you're completely self-sufficient. Your mode of transport is fueled by grass, of which there is an abundance. You kind of like, incredibly self-sufficient, and I had at a time I had probably a maximum of 6 days food on me, and then I'd stock up again, and at a local stores, or I popped into booths in Keswick, not with a team. I just kind of left them in a field. And
I was going to ask, what do you tie them outside the shop?
Yeah, I did have this wonderful moment actually where I rode past a cafe in Portinscale outside Keswick, and the cafe had this kind of like wooden veranda out the front of it, and I was like, I can't ride past that without slinging my reins over and having a cup of coffee. So I had to live my
ultimate cowboy fantasies. Yeah.
And it was there actually I met a woman who said she said, can I come and pat your horse? I was like, oh yeah, of course. And that was a nice thing, it's very easy for people to really engage with you, because you've got a gorgeous looking dog, and and a beautiful friendly pony who didn't have a bad bone in her, and that was just lovely. And so people are drawn to chat with you. And this woman came over, she said, oh, do you think and she, oh, can I pat your horse? And then I was like, oh, you don't know anyone locally who has a field or anything, do you? And she was like, oh, I've got a field. I was like, all right, okay, this is ridiculously serendipitous. And so there now if you want. So I left Pansy in the field, and then me and Finn went off to booze and got a few bits of food and stuff. So things like that happening was a really beautiful surprise, and you don't really know how people are going to respond to you. But yeah, like I say, going back to the team thing, our little team was so tight, and Finn and Pansy were just amazing, and how much you use their instincts to not find your way as in navigate, but just kind of navigating the terrain or the route, or you're kind of using each other's strengths all the time. And Finn, when we came through town and went through Keswick, I had Finn on a long rope, and they just knew like that they needed to be absolutely on it, and I was on it, and we were just like, let's go through town. And I thought I'd have to walk next to them and like keep, because it would be a bit scary. and they were as tight could be. And Finn was listening to my every command, and Pansy was just absolutely like strode through town like she'd done it 100 times, and and yet she'd hardly really been in that much traffic. It was just brilliant, and I think that was an absolute source of joy for me. And I mean, Finn's my dog anyway, and I love him to bits, but Pansy just grew and grew on me. She was just brilliant. So having that, I think that bond was really special. And I think another thing that surprised me was I just was never lonely. I thought I might find it a bit, I like time on my own in the hills, as I said before, but I just wasn't at no point did I feel like, oh, I could really do some company. It was just a pleasure to be with those guys and then chat to people on the way, but not be beholden to anyone at all. And real freedom for me. It was great.
Wonderful. So I suppose, I mean, like you said, you've developed this incredibly strong bond, the three of you, over the course of a month. I mean, how hard was it at the end of the month to sort of adjust back in a way and go, okay, I've done that now? I mean, did you think straight away, I need to do something else? Or was it, okay, phew, I can go sleep in a bed? I mean, how did it finish, and how's it been since, I guess?
Well, that was the chat. Okay, so that now we're getting somewhere. That was a huge part of the challenge. The challenge and the journey was just like a pleasure, the whole thing. But coming back, my heart started, as we got closer to home, actually, we came back through Little Langdale, and we were coming back towards sort of Tarn House and then back into the Rusland Valley down in the south where we'd started off from, really. And it was just, my heart was just getting heavier and heavier with each step back, and it was hard to come back. And I had a particular moment coming back through Tarn House, and we slept on a really beautiful grassy hillside overlooking Tarn House, and we just happened to be looking over all these hills that we'd come through, and there's a great view from up there, and you can look across to sort of Coniston and see like the Helvellyn range, and we'd come through all those mountains, and we were heading home, and I had to go back to work and working full time, and that was partly in an office, and it just was heartbreaking. I did not want to go back, and actually I struggled like mad coming back because I just felt so disconnected from nature that I'd been completely immersed in, and just the pace, I think, as well. I know I can't handle a fast-paced life. It doesn't do me any good. And I know I struggle with my mental health a bit anyway. And I know that a slow pace suits me really well. But of course, you've got to work. And I think coming back to work was hard. And I definitely, the first few nights were weird being back in the house and feeling very separated from the sounds, the smells, and all the, sensations of when you're camping. You're just, I could hear munching the grass all night, or just being close to nature that in that way. Which sounds so cheesy, but you are in a tent. I slept out under the stars quite a bit, and so it was just I missed that like mad. And to come back to work was a jolt. Totally keen to do more of that. And I actually, because Pansy was not mine, I had to leave her and get back in the car and drive home, and that was really the breaking up of our little unit was
a little trio.
Yeah, it was heartbreaking, really. I was bloody glad I had Finn to come back with.
Yes.
I had him, but if I could have got Pansy in my car, I definitely would have done. And there was nothing driving, actually. I really, not being in a car and not driving anywhere for a whole month and just traveling on horseback was just it's the best way to get around. It's a bit slow though, it's got to but slow is good.
I guess, is there anything next? Have you thought this is something that I'd like to do again, maybe, or has it changed, I guess, how you live your everyday life in some way? Has there been things that you've taken from the trip and sort of integrated them into what you do now?
So I don't do that job anymore. I don't work in an office so much anymore. I'm completely self-employed, and that gives me freedom to do other trips and things. So I spent 6 weeks in Canada earlier this year, just before lockdown, actually, thankfully. And that was a totally different kind of trip, but still, journeying overland on foot, snowshoes, actually, during the in a sort of real wilderness trip in Canada, which was very beautiful. So that's changed. I also bought Pansy's younger sister, Gilly, because Pansy was never going to be sold to me or anything. So Tom wanted her back to be part of his herd, and she's a great mare. I can see why he wanted to keep hold of her. She's a bit special, but I bought her slightly idiotic younger sister who who is great, but unfortunately she had an accident, or we had an accident last year, and she broke a bone in her leg. So that's been sad. That's with I had so much enthusiasm to get out and break Gillian and train her up to do more of this, but I'm sat here actually in my living room now with there's a saddle on the chair, and that saddle's going to be sitting there for a bit longer, sadly, but Gilly's survived it, so that was good. I would love to do more, and I'm sort of working towards that, but just sometimes you get setbacks in life, don't you? And the thing with Pansy was so, it's probably a bit nauseating to listen to because it was so perfect, but my life definitely hasn't been that perfect all along, and I'm very, very far from it. It was one of the few things that went amazingly smoothly for me and that I'm really proud of. You then take another step to get you, okay, I'll buy my the first horse I've ever owned, and sadly we've had this accident, so that's been a really major setback, but I'm still optimistic that she's going to recover and we'll do hopefully do more, or I'll maybe borrow another horse at some point. But I'd love to explore Scotland on horseback and do more in the lakes. Where I live, I'm so lucky to live up here, and I say lucky, it was a conscious decision. It wasn't somewhere I was born into. It was the best thing I ever did, really. So yeah, just more exploring around here. And I don't know, I feel quite passionate about promoting how much there is to do in the British Isles, actually, and we don't need to fly off to these far-flung places. Like, it's nice once in a while, definitely, and Canada was a wonderful trip, but I'm absolutely dead set that there's so much to explore in this country, and so much to do, and it's not always about going harder and faster either. I think a lot of adventure promotes that, but actually more and more I think we're starting to see people just having really immersive experiences in nature, and that is such a joy and is just as meaningful, and as going to the top of the highest this or the fastest that. It's there's a lot to be said for just dwelling in lowland places and traveling naturally, with rucksacks and on foot or on bicycles and stuff. I think there's loads to go at in this country, definitely.
Yeah, no, that is so true. And I think it's something that's been brought into really sharp focus, actually, probably over the last sort of 9-10 months as well, that actually not having the option to travel overseas or, and being confined to what's around you as well. I think that's where, what you're saying becomes so true, because you realise there is so much adventure just in being around you and taking notice and actually absorbing where you are, rather than, dreaming of being somewhere else in a way. So if anyone's listening to this and just thinks, oh, wow, one, I would love to get on a horse and go exploring, or two, just I've got this idea, this seed of an adventure that I just really want to get started with, what's your one piece of advice that you'd give them?
Make that commitment. Just I think that's so easy to say, but it's so hard to do. But I think for me, and not everyone is like this, but I'm quite a big scribbler, and I think writing down your ideas and drawing pictures and really spending time visualizing what you'd love to do. Even I've got the geekiest drawings you've ever seen of this is what my saddlebag would look like, and this is what this will be like, and this is the route. And I've shared them on my Instagram a bit, but I should share them again because they make me chuckle, because they look so ridiculous, but actually I think by scribbling about it brings it into sharper focus, and that's what personally I need is to really be able to visualize it. And I don't know, be around people that are like, gee, you on. In fact, Jo Mosey, who you mentioned earlier, I know when she first suggested to her to people she knew that she wanted to paddleboard across the north and from sort of west to east. She was around people that were like, oh no, that'd be far too difficult and blah, blah, blah. And you just don't be around people that say that. You don't be around people that are like, just, I don't know. Am I allowed to swear, Nicki?
You can, but I'll probably have to edit it out, but that's fine. I'll have to give you an explicit warning.
But I do sometimes just like, you've just got to do it. Just do it is another politer version of it. But put all those barriers to one side, be around people that encourage you and are like, yeah, you can do that. And we're going to cheer you on the way. That's really important. So think about who you're around and get writing, get scribbling.
Amazing. That's amazing advice. On both sides, that thing of how you visualize it for yourself, but also, yeah, who are your cheerleaders and who you choose to listen to, I think makes such a huge difference. Like, you know, every single person I think I've spoken to has been, actually, it's about that feeling of being uplifted by people or having people go, yeah, it's possible, you can do it. And we like to think that we're individuals and we can all operate in this sort of this bubble of just going, yeah, it's all just down to me. But actually just having people around you, and that makes such an important difference. And that's been so amazing. Thank you so much, Clare. If people want to find more about you and what you're up to, where can they go?
I'm on Instagram as the Horseback Adventurer, and I've got a website, www.claredyson.com. And yeah, love to hear from folk always, and yeah, and share the passion for adventures and wildlife and all lovely things like that. So yeah.
Thank you so much again for agreeing to come on the show. It's been such a pleasure having you, and hopefully we'll get you back on in the future as well. And you can, once you've been traveling around Scotland and doing all the other adventures as well.
I'll commit to that. Okay, I'll
commit to that, then we'll get you back on. Yeah. Awesome. It's been lovely to speak to you, and I hope to catch up again soon. Take care. Bye. So listening back over my conversation with Clare, I was struck by a number of things. I think the first was the point she made that when she was trying to commit to get started, to get everything prepared, and the advice she was given that you could leave today and you would probably be fine. And I think it's a really fine balance between feeling and being ready and just going for it. And I know that's something we've explored in other conversations. The other thing that really struck me was this point about this was an adventure to slow down. Often adventures are about achievement in the sense of being the first or doing something really challenging and difficult physically. It can be that we place time pressures over ourselves, or we want to get it done at a certain pace and at a certain time. And I thought what was really interesting about Clare's adventure was that in a way it was designed to do the opposite. It was about simplicity. It was about being in the moment. And actually that's in the end what she missed most when she came back, was just that feeling of being connected to the world around her, the relationship with the animals, but very much living from moment to moment. And I think we are so used to operating at such a frenetic pace that we don't even notice it ourselves. Sometimes we jump from task to task. Often we've got several tabs open in our brain that we are trying to manage. And then we sort of catch ourselves and wonder why we feel so exhausted. And there's something I think that's really to be said for how we simplify our lives, how we can ground ourselves in the moment, how we can find a way back to being present when all of that sort of pace and franticness is going on around us. And yeah, so I guess that's my thought I would like to leave you with today, that the world is very fast paced. There is so much happening. How do we gain a sense of control over that potentially? And it's not control over the world, because that's impossible, but control over our busyness, of our sense of feeling pressurized, of our sense of feeling we have to work at a pace that is set by other people, that we should be doing more, going back to the tyranny of the shoulds all the time. So Yeah, I would love to know what you think. Please do reach out, get in touch, let me know. You can find me on Instagram, Resilience at Work. You can join the Facebook group, Everyday Adventure Club. Contact me via the website, which is resiliencework.co.uk. Yeah, please do reach out. I would love to hear from you. And otherwise, we will be back again next week with another episode, another wonderful guest. So I really look forward to seeing you then. All right, speak to you soon. Take care. Bye.